March 14th, 2022 at 6:05, I'm sorry, 5:05. My name is Matt Zacher. I'm the secretary, and Ryan Austin is not here at the moment. If you want to go around the table here, introduce yourselves, please. Start with Joe.
Joe Eichstead, city engineer.
Nick Dooms, design engineer.
Dean Beneman, alderperson.
Tom Merriam, District 4, alderperson.
Sue Schill, city attorney.
Patrick Delaney, committee member.
Shane Blazer.
Tim DeSorsi, finance director.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, review request by residents along Smith Street and Cherry Street not to reinstall sidewalk along these 2022 road projects. Joe?
Just a quick background on this. We did receive a petition and signatures which are included in the packet, and we're preparing to reconstruct both of these streets here this spring. And in reviewing the Chapter 6 sidewalk ordinance, in consistency with that ordinance, our construction plans were put together to reinstall the sidewalk. We do have those set up such that we can remove the sidewalk sufficiently without issue. A couple other interesting bits of information regarding the neighborhood. There's very little traffic there, both vehicle and pedestrian, and both of those streets are local streets. So other than that, I don't have any more information on it, other than I could see it going either way as far from my perspective or opinion on it.
Mr. Delaney, do you have any questions?
I would open the floor to anybody that has to speak about it.
You're good. Thank you, Shane. My name's Dave Judnick. I live at 1780 Smith Street. Been there for approximately 25 years now. I'm the one, I guess you could say, that initiated the signatures for all the residents, or the majority of the residents that live on our street. And our biggest concern is why Smith Street, which is not quite 3 blocks long, has a sidewalk on both sides of the street, on the majority of the street, but yet you look at every other neighborhood within a 10-block or further radius, and they have no sidewalks whatsoever on any of the other streets. So our question really is, why do we need to pay for the cost of this sidewalk when that is not the norm for any other street in the neighborhood? Based on our traffic, like I indicated, and how much use the street is, it seems we could save some money, not only for the residents having to pay for the additional cost for the sidewalk, but also for the city to have to replace something that is out of the norm for every other street around. Now, First Street was replaced 2-3 years ago, and that has one sidewalk on the side, but that is a major thoroughfare from Buren to Rapids, and it's quite busy. Smith Street's just a little side street off of that, and we have 2 sidewalks and a street that's basically 3 blocks long. So our preference is not to pay that cost and to save the cost on the homeowners as well as save the cost on the city. So if there's something we can do to amend that rule so that we don't have to pay for it, that is what we would like done. So at this time, most of us on the street honestly do not want the sidewalk put back in and the cost of that sidewalk. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to speak?
I guess I will, since the wife is elbowing me. Jaron Goodwin, 1761 Smith Street. So I have the same agreements with Dave as far as not needing it. The people that do walk, they do use the road. The sidewalks, to save money, just not now, but in the continuous future, from buckling, repairs, damage. The sidewalks currently are at all kinds of levels, so it's wear and tear on personal equipment as far as snow blowers, edging, city repairs as far as replacing concrete when it does heave or if there's water mains that break, stuff like that. But Dave and I went around collecting signatures from everybody, and everybody that we talked to was in agreement. If they do walk, the road is wide enough that they don't need a sidewalk. They would rather have that extra 2 feet of yardage that they can plant stuff to make their houses look a little bit better. They don't want the maintenance, extra maintenance added on to their daily, weekly, winter time activities. And then the big thing was the cost, additional cost of it. We have 3 people in the neighborhood that are on fixed incomes. We have quite a few people that can barely afford their mortgage payments right now as it sits. One person is 3 months behind on their mortgage right now because they lost their job. Another lady had her aunt move in to make her mortgage payment because she lost her job at Verso. So there's a lot of aspects that are covering this, not just because a road 5 blocks away doesn't have a sidewalk. There's so many things, and the petition that we had signed, the people that weren't at home when we were there, we have talked to them after that, and everyone that I have talked to said if we need additional signatures, they would sign it also because they find no need for a sidewalk in our little neighborhood. Thank you.
Joe, what would happen to the sidewalk that is in disrepair right now?
If the motion is approved, or if there's a motion to approve this item, it would be to not reinstall sidewalks on those 2 streets. So essentially, we're going to be pulling out a sufficient amount of sidewalk to put in water services and sanitary laterals and driveway approaches that we wouldn't put the sidewalk back then. We'd just take it all out.
Mayor Blazer?
Thank you. I agree with the residents, and I can actually say that I grew up in that neighborhood where they're talking about, not far from them. And as a kid, we played in the streets. We rode our bikes around. Like I was telling them earlier, that's where I learned to ride my bike without training wheels in that street in front of their houses. And, you know, there is access to sidewalks on First Street, which is a busy road. This is a side residential area that it really, I personally have experienced no need for a sidewalk. So I'm just echoing support for the not replacing those sidewalks there. Thank you.
Yeah, anything else? No. So Joe, it's not that I'm not, I'm good either way. My question is the, if we vote tomorrow to put the transportation utility into effect, that would take care of the costs of this project, correct? For the special assessments?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so that wouldn't necessarily be an issue. So then the other question I have is, like, again, a year into this, it kind of seems to go back and forth in terms of this is what the ordinance is, but we don't necessarily want to do it this way this time, or this is what the ordinance is and we want to enforce the ordinance even though the residents don't want to enforce the ordinance. So my question, I guess, is like for the future of the city, my understanding is we want to put sidewalks in these collector streets, all collector streets, but at the same time, we're saying it's not really necessary to do that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it has been problematic over the years. As I mentioned at the last meeting, each year we, one or two of our 4 or 5 projects that we're doing, we'll end up having to take back into committee for special sidewalk consideration for not falling within the black and white text of the ordinance. There is a provision in Chapter 6 that identifies that sidewalks shall be installed when the street is reconstructed, rehabilitated, or overlaid if any of the following conditions are met, and if it is approved by the Common Council. So there's, I don't know if you want to call it a loophole or not, but there is a mechanism in there for, I guess, maybe deviating from what's written, if approved by the council. So I guess that's kind of how it's been treated in the past, and there's been some, I guess, confusion, and moving forward, I think that, any future referral on sidewalks in the city, that having a well-defined plan, put sidewalks in where they're most needed, will help to alleviate some of these issues where, residents would come back in and say, well, sidewalk isn't really needed here. And in some cases, and perhaps this one, is that's a true statement.
The downside to this is then every time we do roads, the residents could come back and, sign a petition and say, we don't really want sidewalks here. But we have to kind of draw a line between, that's what you're saying, is we have to kind of have an established parameters as to when we even question putting them in or not putting them in?
Yeah, I think at least having some legwork done up front with an official plan will definitely help identify where, at least when the plan is put together, where sidewalk is most needed and beneficial for the community. And, it'll alleviate some of these areas just trying to fit the situation that we find out in the field with these projects in with the ordinance and trying to account for all scenarios.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Blazer?
Joe, couldn't that be dependent on like a traffic count? If there was a certain traffic count on a road, that would be considered arterial or a safe route to school type road, that could be a criteria for sidewalk placement versus a back area residential area? Yeah,
it is a criteria that's already, I guess, incorporated to some degree in with the street classifications. They're classified in part based upon how much traffic they're intended to carry or actually carry.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the residents' request to not reinstall sidewalk along Smith and Cherry Street for the 2022 road projects.
I'll second. Any further conversation? Mayor Blazer?
That
Hey, this
might-
is Ryan Austin here on the phone. Can you hear me?
I was going to tell you Ryan's online.
Yep. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize. Day job caught up to me here today, so I'm joining by phone here. So just wanted to let you know I was online. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no further comments or conversations. Yep, sorry.
Real quick, yeah. Is there any other street there that has sidewalk? Okay.
Just First Street.
Yeah, First Street, I know that. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, well, yeah. I'll just say that basically other than First Street, and it was a mistake, I think, we only put it on one side of the street, but, in that area, there is sidewalk other than on Riverview. I know nothing on Riverview. I, correct. I'm just in the area of where this project is. And so that the project area has sidewalk. First Street has sidewalk. So where we're talking about where there isn't sidewalk is the Riverview Drive that goes along the river. So most of the area involved in that, in the project area, which Riverview Drive isn't, but in there, in that, the street next to it, most of that is sidewalk. And I hear your concerns. I've heard many of them over a long time on many different projects. My guess is that it's going to be that the project will be done without sidewalk. I think the city needs to reaffirm what they want to do, somewhat as Joe had mentioned, with a build-out of where the sidewalks, where we'd like them to be. I thought we had done that or had talked about that in the past. They may not be needed in every area, but sidewalks are beneficial, I do believe. I know there are those that say and do about growing up and playing in the street and that type of thing, and I can't deny it myself. But it's also something, on the other hand, that we hear that the sidewalks weren't meant to play in. That isn't why they were built. So it's a conundrum of which way to go. And actually, as Matt has mentioned, that the next item on the agenda is if that gets passed, will alleviate hopefully some of the problems that one of the concerns anyway. It still will be that people don't want sidewalks in some places, but in that with the utility that's being talked about, if that gets passed, that assessment that would be put on the shoulders of those in the area of the project, for that part for that would not be there, as the utility transportation ordinance is to spread the cost of that across the city. So hopefully, my hope is that we have less people that I guess don't want the sidewalks and that, but I think I think for this committee and others that it's important that that the committee and the city come up with a plan of where sidewalks are to be. And I think with that would also address the situation, hopefully, of where they would be replaced, I guess, if projects were done and taken out. That sidewalks would just be taken out without even having to maybe come to the committee. That would be part of it. But it's just I hope we don't get back into what we were in years ago. And that is that every project just about came before the committee. I think just about every project, 'cause it sure seems like it. There were a lot of them. And sidewalks were the biggest thing, that people didn't want sidewalks. And so I just hope, again, that, take a hard look at it. I'm assuming that my assumption is that it'll pass without the sidewalks being put in. But I think for the committee's sake and the council's sake, that, the situation should be addressed, and, the need for and where, and I guess if the ordinance has to be changed and whatnot to update, then that should be, taken care of too, so that's all.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So as far as the sidewalks on Spring Street itself, in the actual construction area, there is about a block and a half on the south side of Spring Street that does not have any sidewalks whatsoever. And there's about a half a block on the north side of Spring Street that does not have, or excuse me, Smith Street, that does not have any sidewalks whatsoever. So there's a 2-block area with sidewalks, and then on the north side, they just kind of fade off into nowhere. So, they are very useless. And the yards in our neighborhood are pretty large. So back when Mayor Blazer was growing up, there's not, the kids aren't playing in the street anymore. If there are people on the roads, they're walking their dogs, walking with their family. So you can't walk a family down a sidewalk if you got 2 dogs and 4 kids. So they're generally going down the road anyway. There's no traffic. And even with the special assessment being passed, if it does pass, nobody still wants the sidewalks in the area. So when it gets to that point, it's not about money. It's just something that's not needed, not wanted. Because of the no traffic situation, where the sidewalk diminishes on both ends of a 2-block street, it's kind of like, why were they even put in that 2-block area to begin with? So.
If I may?
Go ahead.
So I think we kind of touched on this in our last Public Works meeting with Mr. Eichstead about the standardized city sidewalk map, and kind of the direction that we'd like to go. Can Mr. Eichstead explain what his recommendation for this area would be, given that he would be analyzing this particular construction area, and what his recommendation would have been for sidewalk under the standardized sidewalk plan for the city?
So without having any defined guidance, I did make the statement at the last Public Works meeting, just kind of off the cuff, but being that this neighborhood is kind of a separate little neighborhood, almost a subdivision type, that the only traffic that goes in there is mainly to the homes that are there. There isn't a through traffic that exists. That the benefit of having sidewalk installed in this area is quite low, and and any future plan and sidewalk map that would be put together, at least the initial thought would be that the recommendation would be to remove the sidewalk in this area.
Thanks, Joe.
Any other comments, questions? All right, we'll take to a vote to send it to council. Those in favor of the motion presented, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Number 3, review proposed transportation utility ordinance and review proposed changes to current special assessment ordinances in chapters 5 and 6. Joe, please.
So following last week's Public Works meeting, we went through and Sue updated the draft ordinance. That was, I think, hopefully everybody, you all have a copy of that. There's still, so the changes are identified in red text, so we believe we captured everything. I guess as we were discussing just prior to the meeting, as far as discussion about the 3% increment each year up to that amount for a target revenue increase. That was one item that isn't reproduced in the draft ordinance at this time, along with I think there was a mention of a 5-year cap or something similar to that. But neither of those two were drafted. I guess just pointing those out for everybody. There isn't any draft language on that. So if we've captured all of those items, the main topic to discuss is the assessed party credit. And as presented last week, the assessed party credit would essentially be for those parties that would credit the transportation utility fee for parties that have previously been assessed and are still paying on assessments, as well as those that that had paid off their assessments, but would still otherwise be paying on those assessments had they not already paid off their bill in full. So that there's a separate document that was distributed that outlines that first option. That's what's currently drafted in the ordinance that's before you. We did meet late last week and discussed a second option for consideration, and that's under option 2, and that's in light of the efforts of the city council looking for alternatives to special assessments since the beginning of early 2020. We looked at special assessment invoices from 2020 and 2021. And so for assessed parties that received assessment invoices in 2020 and 2021, this option 2 would include writing off special assessment balances remaining with invoice dates in those years, as well as refunding refunds that would be sent to those assessed parties, again, for those invoiced in 2020 and 2021 that paid in full. The refund amount in this case would be for the remaining balance owed if they were still on the installment plan. And then in addition to that, for special assessment balances prior to 2020, that there would continue to pay special assessments but would receive a credit on the transportation utility fee in accordance with the assessed party fee credit as outlined in the draft ordinance. And Tim, I don't know if you have the values for 2020 and 2021 for the balance that would be written off and the refund amount to quantify those two scenarios.
Sure. Just kind of doing some analysis here, and under option number 2, the outstanding balances for invoices dated 2020 and 2021 would be $651,281, and refunds for people that paid those invoices in full dated 2020 and 2021 would be $357,096. And the reasoning for the refund is that if we're going to write off the outstanding balance for people that were on the installment plan, in order to treat people that maybe paid it and got billed in the year and paid in full, that in order to make those two parties equitable, the refund would be due. And basically the refund would be the original invoice less the amounts that would have put on the installment if they had chosen the installment plan.
Any questions? Mr. Delaney?
I have a question. Last week you had the owner of Pasquale's join in, and he asked for a what his would be. This is a pretty typical business, I would say, on 8th Street. Was that information given to him? And
Yes.
Is that something that we
Yep.
can
And he-
share publicly?
Mr. Fode's here this evening too, so.
Yeah, is that information that we can share publicly?
I would think so. Try to log back into my computer here. I don't recall the amount offhand. Okay, so for 2920 8th Street South, the estimated monthly transportation utility fee is about $18.50 per month.
You said $18.50. $18.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to open the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, so if it's vacant and not being used, there is a provision in the ordinance for that. If it's currently empty. Pardon me? Yes, it's based on its use, so if the use is vacant, I believe there's still the base fee would still be applied to a vacant property, but there would be no transportation trip fee.
The service fee for the transportation utility is similar to the service fees that are applied to sewer, water, and electric.
Yeah, there would still
That
be a
even
like
if you had-
administrative fee.
Even if you had no use, you'd still have that fee to pay.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
And right now, the base fee is anticipated to be $6 per account
Okay.
per year.
In that building, there's 4 units, and each one has separate utilities for gas and electric.
Okay.
So, and then there's a 5th utility for, each unit is going to get assessed, or only the one? The building's only assessed once, right? As far as the utility,
So,
transportation utility?
yeah, so if it's a strip mall type of thing where you've got 3 or 4 multiple businesses in there, they could all each have their own individual use. And so we'd have to look at each of those businesses and, the space that they occupy to come up with the appropriate
No.
trip charge.
Well, I I pay the sewer and water, but the electric is split up between the units and the gas. So, if there's some discretion about what the monthly charge with the transportation utility, do you actually do traffic counts in and out of driveways, or?
No, we don't, we wouldn't do the traffic counts. It's all based upon characteristics of the property and based on the trip generation manual.
So the trip generation manual takes into account the size of our city? Or does that include cities like Oshkosh, Fond du Lac, Milwaukee?
It's a national, I guess, data set of studies. So it's comprised of, I mean, I've got a stack of manuals that are, you know, over a foot high that includes studies that derive statistical averages for various types of properties based upon their footprint. So it's
For cities our size?
It's
Or
irregardless of,
they incorporate all population areas?
right, it's irregardless of the type of community, the community
Okay.
size, the demographics.
Okay. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
And Mr. Delaney, I gave you 2920, which was not Pasquale's. If 2930 is Pasquale's, and that's about $55 per month.
I also have a question that he had brought up about each individual place. You're saying property characteristics. Is each property graded, such as A, B, C, D, as far as how often? Because you could have a restaurant that is the same square footage as another restaurant right next door to each other. One is always busy, the other has nobody.
Yeah, so it really, the land use code is the type of use that best fits the property. So, you know, say you have a restaurant, we'd pick a land use code that most appropriately fits that type of restaurant. And so you could have, you know, McDonald's, for instance, versus this particular restaurant that Mr. Foti owns, and they'd land in a different land use category. So there's a different land use code that's applied to it, and then the trip generation is completely different. And so, but if you have two properties that fall in the same land use code, and one business sees a lot of commercial traffic and the next one doesn't, it doesn't differentiate between that.
Anything else?
Done for now, thanks.
Great.
If I may,
1 second, Ryan. I'll get to you right after Mr. Foti. Sorry.
Well, the information you gave me about Pasquale's was $55 a month, and then down the road by Walmart is Applebee's at $73 a month. And they have an awful lot of traffic down there, and I believe the business that Applebee's does in a week is what I'm lucky to do in a month. So they're doing 4 times the business, but their transportation utility is 25%, 30% more. I'm curious about how this becomes equitable. for everybody.
Thank you. Ryan, go ahead.
So I'd like to move back to the, it would be the assessed party fee credit, option 1 and option 2. I heard a few numbers tossed around. Forgive me, it's a little tough on the phone here. But I heard for as far as write-off for 2020 and 2021, I think I heard $600,000. Is that true?
Correct, it'd be 651,000 and change.
Okay, and then those fees or those write-offs would be coming from the transportation utility if passed? That's also a true statement?
No, the 651 is just the outstanding balance that people that chose the installment plan. So basically, if nothing were to change going forward, those are the amounts that over the life of whatever installment, whether it be 5, 10, or 15 years, that would be collected through the amount that's put on their tax bill. So if we wrote those off, we're just writing off outstanding balances. It doesn't have a monetary effect as far as like the refunds. It would just be more like you're foregoing the future revenues that those installments would generate on the tax roll.
Okay, and then those write-off totals, was that the 300,000 that I heard?
The amount of the refunds was $357,000 and change. And basically, the premise behind that is that if you're writing off balances of people that chose the installment and that's their outstanding balance as of today, basically we would look at, for people that were billed, say in 2021, they got their special assessment invoice and paid it in full, that they would have no outstanding balance to write off. So in order to make those two parties equal, because we don't want to penalize the people that paid it in full in the year that they received the invoice, we don't want to penalize them for paying it in full, where people that chose the installment are getting the rest of the balance written off. So the $357,000 represents the original amount of the invoice less the amount that would have been put on the tax roll, depending on if it was in 2020, it'd be 2 years of installments subtracted off that, and 2021 would be 1 year's installment, so that we're making the amount that we're writing off the balances equitable to the ones that paid it in full. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so those refunds, would they be coming out of the transportation utility funds then, or this would be the tax roll like you had mentioned, right?
The $357,000 would probably come out, since we collected that revenue, we'd probably take it out of our general fund reserves.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. Tim, what do you think is, like, as you're going through this and working it out on paper, what's the win-win? Is there a win-win for the residents and for the city, or?
The problem is you have special assessments that have been, created under the ordinance and collected. And, I don't think there's any correct right answer or any wrong answer. At some point you have to make a decision, and there's going to be a cutoff, and, chips will fall where they may, But, one thing I also want to just kind of add to this, and I have to do some research and probably consult with, some tax experts, is that I'm not sure if the forgiveness of debt or the refund would be forgiveness of debt under the IRS rules. And under IRS rules, if you're forgiven debt, that becomes taxable income, and then we'd have to issue a 1099-C. So, obviously special assessments aren't like a mortgage or, a strict loan, but that's something I'd have to look into to make sure that, we don't have an IRS issue. And if we did, that's fine. We just have to obviously issue 1099s for either the amount of the forgiveness of debt or the refund.
Thank you. Sue, was there any, I know we were going to wait for some legal questions. Was there anything that you saw that we needed to know?
I guess I would probably, excuse me, I would probably be more in favor of a credit-based system rather than kind of, as Tim got into, the refund of assessments that have already been legally passed and been placed as debt. So, I mean, I realize you have to, as Tim said again, you have to decide kind of when is the period that you're going forward and treating residents this way versus the ones that have already paid, and what is the look back period? Is it 1 year or 2 years? But I guess I would be, just legally speaking, and the safer way I would say would be to just base it on the credits, and those would be those people that are already that are in pay status, or would be if they would have deferred their assessments, and that way you're treating it as a credit. You're not refunding. You're not canceling any debt. You're just treating it as a credit towards their transportation utility fee. So that would basically be option one. Option two, you may get into the forgiveness of debt. You may get into the arbitrariness of choosing how far back you go, and also that your assessments were based upon the framework that you had at that time, and can't be arbitrary and capricious. So that now you are going back and wiping some of those out. I guess that makes it a little more legally suspect. So obviously I believe the credit is the safer route to go, and probably is, I don't want to say more fair, but especially, I'm assuming you're obviously not going to assess for any of the projects from 2020, right? Or with 2021. So those people have final resolutions yet. But I would be in favor of the credit framework versus the hybrid where you're actually refunding and wiping away assessments and also crediting.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney?
You said that the $357,095 would come out of general fund reserves. What would the $651,000 come out of?
Well, because that's just the outstanding that we're anticipating to collect over future tax rolls. It would just be a forgiveness. There would be no money exchanged, and that would just be writing off the outstanding balance that would be collected in future tax rolls.
And I just have one more question for Joe. So we've had a real life scenario here where Mr. Fody has said that just down the road with Applebee's, I think Applebee's being a chain store would have more traffic. How can we be assured that we're doing this fairly so that businesses and residents are treated fairly?
So I guess a couple thoughts as far as fairness. There's applying the manual consistently helps with that. So obviously, when you're comparing properties of the same land use code, they also have a square foot component to them. So, same land use code, the fees are going to be potentially different based upon their size, but based upon the actual business that a property does, how much traffic a property actually sees, there is still a provision in the draft ordinance that would allow for traffic counts to be done and provided. And that would be the only way to really know. And in that case, that's where we could deviate from the manual based upon substantial information that we can deviate from.
So when you do these traffic counts, are you going to be doing, so Mr. Fody has his traffic counts done. Are you going to compare a business such as Applebee's or some other, I don't know the restaurant business. Are you going to compare at the same time to come to some sort of, or are you just
No.
going to do his traffic counts?
Because then it would lend itself to deviating away from the manual and creating our own numbers to use. And but certainly a property that if they find that oh geez, I don't generate even close to it, and they find that it would be beneficial for me to have traffic counts done and provide that information to the city, certainly that would be an avenue that we could review that information and make adjustments accordingly.
Are you confident that we are going to be fair with the businesses and the residents of Wisconsin Rapids if we continue down this path?
Well, if we consistently apply the manual, I think it's about as fair as we can get, and still providing an avenue for unique situations.
I just had a quick question to follow up on that. So my understanding is the more we stick to the manual, the kind of safer we are as we develop the utility, to base it more on the manual, so it's kind of across the board fair.
Yep, and still, yeah, sticking with the manual, applying it uniformly from property to property, and but also acknowledging that there are unique situations, and that, you know, with the proper documentation, that would be considered and adjusted accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mayor Blazer?
Yeah, so I've talked to a lot of people over the course of months. You know, most people have been in favor of it. However, you know, I spoke to a church which was in a unique situation. You know, they opposed the utility for the fact that 3 of the 4 sides of their churches have all been done within the last decade. So they've been arguing that they have paid their fair share of assessments. And the 4th side about, you know, because they're wrapped around the corners. So, you know, about a third of that side has already been done. And so he's wondering if there was something in place, and maybe one of the sides might have been built in 2020 or 2021, that they might see a little reprieve on one side. But that was, you know, a unique situation, which, you know, has been a hardship or, you know, a factor within their church. Just wanted to point out that situation.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Rayl.
Yeah, thank you. Just one comment on the ordinance here that we have, I guess, on that one that's stapled together. I don't know, we got about 8 sheets or so, maybe page 6, and it's been talked about before, but just to bring it up, and I have a hard time with it myself somewhat, in that it's, I guess it'd be number 2 from the page before. It's highlighted in red. And the resolution would, to increase the transportation utility budget, shall require a 2/3 vote of the members voting. And I've heard and I know the reasoning behind that. I just wonder if that isn't possibly hamstringing future councils down the road, but wanting to do something, and where a simple majority could do it, that it's making a super majority make the rule. And so I'm personally somewhat having a hard time that's how that should be. I am leaning towards that it should be just a simple majority, and that would be it. And I know there are many that feel the other ways, but I just wanted to mention that, and so I'm thinking about that. So it's just, I've listened to the reason why in the case of what we have. There's a difference of 1 vote, basically. Well, 2 votes. We could have a 4-4 tie, I guess, but we need 6 out of the 8 to make the 2/3. So, I just don't know if we're setting the bar too high for future councils to, with that 2/3 vote to have a supermajority. To me, it's a supermajority. To make the change if they see the need for it, so. If the majority would see a need for it, but they wouldn't have that extra numbers to make the change, so, that's all.
Thank you. Patrick?
I have a question for Tim. So you gave us these two options, option one and option two. Option two has the forgiveness back 2020 and 2021. How did this arise? I know that the transportation utility has been discussed for many years. Is that how this came up? Like that have we made any statements that we would forgive anything like that to residents or anything like? Has the city made any statements?
No, not that I'm aware of. I think it was just one of those things where as we talked about the transportation and then obviously the special assessments, what to do with the existing ones. Staff just came up with some options to kind of get something, as far as some options and let council kind of look at it and determine what they want to do. So there's been no promises of any refunds or write-offs or anything like that. We're just trying to look at, obviously we have, from the beginning, there was always the credit option as far as, issuing a credit under the transportation utility, for, ones that are currently paying under special assessments or that have paid it off, and then obviously this was, as through the discussions over the past, I guess since 2020, the discussions we've had of looking at, there's been various discussions about what do we do with existing refunds, whatever, and they felt just kind of giving these two options as a starting point to look and what the impact would be financially and also on, not only on the city, but on the homeowners, and it was just kind of a thing just to get on the floor so that this committee and the council as a whole could look at it and, discuss it and determine what they want to do.
Okay, so option one is more of a credit where it would be more like the $651,000. We haven't collected it, we haven't billed it, anything like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think under option one is that, for special assessments that have been billed, the people can continue to pay their installments on the tax roll, and then in relief of the, in consideration of the transportation utility, they would get a credit for the amount that they would be billed under the transportation utility for the length of the duration that their installment, if they're on a 10-year and say they have 9 years left, they would get that credit for 9 years. We'd also look back at, for residents that paid it in full, we would do that same calculation, like if they would show us the installment, if they had like 8 years left, they would get that credit for 8 years, even though they paid it in full, don't have an outstanding balance.
Okay, so you never said that about any financial impact of option one. Is there any financial impact that would give us?
The financial impact would be foregoing whatever would be generated under the transportation utilities for those parcels that would receive the credit. I don't have a number for that at this point.
Okay, and this would go back how many years?
It would be for anyone that currently it has installments left, and we would calculate basically how many years they have on their installment that they're paying going forward, and they would get that credit. So if someone say they had original installment plan of 10 years and they had 5 years left, and anyone can correct me here if I'm wrong on this, but if they had 10 years and say they had 5 years of installments left, they would get a credit for those 5 years that they're paying on their installment. And then we'd also do a look back, say that same person, say, paid it off the year they got billed. And we're doing an analysis as of 1/1/22. And we'd say if they were on the installment, they would have 5 years left. We would give that credit, even though they don't have an outstanding balance or not currently paying, but we're recognizing that they paid the invoice in full back when they got billed.
Okay, so if somebody was billed $10,000 for sidewalks and street repair as a resident, and they end up, they would not also be paying the transportation utility. Is that correct, or is this just for businesses?
No, this would be for anyone that received a special assessment invoice.
Okay, so they're paying their $8 a year, that gets deferred, but it's a $10,000 bill. What happens to that?
Well, under this scenario one, they would continue to pay off their special assessment. So basically, anyone that had a special assessment installment plan would continue to pay, they would receive that credit. The difference was, obviously, and as part of that, is that we wouldn't be levying or issuing any new special assessment invoices for projects going forward also.
And that would last until the end of their,
Well, I'm just saying that basically anyone that has a special assessment outstanding balance would continue to pay on that. It would be placed on the tax roll like it normally would have been under the current ordinance. And then, and then they would receive that credit for as long as that installment is placed on the tax roll. And in addition to that is that there would be no new special assessment invoices going forward, because that's what the transportation utility fee would be going to offset future special assessment invoices.
all right, that's all I have for now, thanks.
Mr. Austin, do you have anything? So Joe, Mr. Ike said, at this point, we need to make a motion on one of these two in order to move forward for tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, I guess, so there is a draft already with the assessed party fee credit. And so it could be as simple as, making a motion on that draft ordinance, or selecting an option. Option 2.
Okay, this is just my thoughts. Like, I don't know how we would make it if we go back 2 years. I mean, to make that fair for everybody who's been paying special assessments for the last 15 years or whatever. It seems like it would make more controversy. Whereas the credit system, although nobody's going to necessarily love it, it's kind of fair from the get-go, the way it's kind of set out. And we're looking at changing this ordinance for the first time in 30 years, or even more. I think this special assessment's been on the books for a long, long time. We're changing it now, and I think we need to do our best to change it right now with the clean switchover, and to do the credit-based system, allowing people to not be double charged, even though we know that the fees they're being charged don't compare to the special assessments they're paying off. That's the reality of it. But as long as we have the line drawn in a clear fashion that this was the old and this is the new and this is what it started and this is what we're moving, this is how we're going to make the transition, I feel like the credit system is more straightforward that way and laid out. That's my take on it.
If I may.
Go ahead. Ryan.
I think I'd echo what Mr. Zacher just explained. The refund end of this thing kind of makes me a little nervous, and like Matt said, there's nothing really going to be fair about it as far as those that have recently been issued special assessments and that have paying on it. That's really not the point of this, is to go back and try to give some forgiveness or reprieve to those that have already paid. The point of this is to move on, clean slate, and get rid of special assessments. So I too would be leaning more towards the original ordinance language with the credit.
Thank you, Mayor Blazer.
So Tim, if I'm paying on my tax bill, say $500 a year for my credit or for my installments for 10 years, and I had 5 years left, what would my credit be? It would be my $20 per year on my transportation utility, correct?
Correct. It would be whatever a resident, assuming you're a residential property, and it would be whatever the TUD fee would be per year for that property.
And then conversely, if I was a business and I paid off, I think there's disparity between a business and a residential credit, because my credit as a business owner is going to be much larger than $20 per year. So I'm going to get basically a larger credit because I have a larger trip charge or number of trips. Correct.
Right, obviously, properties that, have more trips than a standard residential, obviously will receive a larger credit, assuming that they both have special assessment outstanding or have paid it off in the past, number.
Patrick?
Okay, so option one is the current ordinance, but you have examples in there, and it wouldn't replace, like if option one doesn't replace anything in the ordinance.
No, just what's in the separate single page is just to have both options written out just for comparison's sake, to help with the discussion and comparison.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything in the ordinance that we want to go over?
I think now would be the time to speak. So are there any more questions specifically about how we're going to handle the implementation of the credit system or the refunding or anything like that? I believe you need us to take some kind of direction, right, on how we want to move this forward for tomorrow.
Yeah, I would think we should have a recommendation from this committee to council.
If I may,
Please.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed transportation utility ordinance as written, including the credit portions in chapters 5 and 6.
I'll second it, that motion. Are there any further questions?
So he's saying as presented, the whole chapter 51?
Yes,
No, I
as
think
presented.
we're just talking about the credit, how we're going to handle the credit system, right?
But we're talking about the entire ordinance as well,
All right.
including the changes that we've made and the credit system that we intend to use.
Okay, then that being said, if we're looking to make a motion on the entire ordinance, I believe, Mr. Delaney, you had some further comments?
I would basically just like to talk about Tom Rayom had brought up the 2/3 majority, some of the changes that we had made. If there's anything else that we wanted to put in there, I just wanted to get it out there and talk about it. I mean, that's where I'm at.
Does anybody else have comments?
Sure, if I may.
Yes.
I think we've discussed this particular situation quite a bit as a council, and this utility could absolutely turn into a monster as far as financial funding is concerned. And with that being said, I think council has to do their due diligence in making sure there's a good majority of council people that are willing to make changes to this ordinance on a financial level. And to me, you could go, as it sits right now, you could go at a 4-4 tie, and our good mayor is the tiebreaker. And I just feel like we need to take it a step above that level. And I think the 2/3 majority does that. So that's where I stand on it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'd,
Mr.
I'd like to echo what what Ryan had said. I agree. I'm concerned about it growing out of proportion, and so I'm in favor of the 2/3 majority moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick?
So what was discussed before was either a 5-year hold on the $500,000 or a 3% increase per year so that it doesn't get out of hand. From my understanding, that would be taken care of by the 2/3 majority vote for an increase. Is that correct?
I guess I'm not sure what it would be taken care of by, well, the minutes reflected that there was a request for a 2/3 vote for a change in the budget. And so I struggled with, I put it as an increase in the budget because let's say there was a resolution that doesn't get passed. What does that mean? Is that then the prior year's number, or can you decrease with less than a majority? So I guess that's a good topic to discuss is what do you mean by the 2/3? What is the 2/3 majority for? Is it any time you want to increase above the last year's, or is it any change from last year's? Because you have to think of if that doesn't pass, then what is the status quo that you're left with? Is it the prior year's budget number? And now you're talking about percentages and so on, and those aren't in here because I know Joe talked about that, but that wasn't in the minutes. But that's something more that you want to discuss then, because presently it is not in there. It just simply says you need a 2/3 majority to increase the utility budget.
Should there be something in there as a cost of living increase or something like that?
Well, I guess, so you want to further limit it that there is, that even with the 2/3, you can't go over the cost of living?
No,
or
that wouldn't limit it at all. I'm just saying it would be so this year would be 500,000, next year would be 515.
So would it automatically would increase? Or that's what you're voting on and requires a 2/3 vote?
Well, then you wouldn't need to, you would just automatically increase it. You wouldn't
Okay.
need the
Okay.
2/3 majority, and then it wouldn't get out of control.
So a resolution to increase above the last year's budget plus the cost of living would require a 2/3 vote? I mean, is that, no? Okay,
Yes, yep.
sure, but it can be however you, so then kind of the default is it's going to be 500,000 plus whatever the cost of living increases, whatever number we use. And then, however, if the council wants to increase that, over that, let's say it's 510, then you need a 2/3 vote to do that. I mean, you're still going to need a resolution, though, a regular resolution to set the budget, because that's what the ordinance says, is each year you're setting that budget.
Okay, so
Unless you want to, I mean, we could change that, or that it's automatically, that it could automatically default to that. But I think it's better probably that there's the budget each year, and then it's decided what that number is. And maybe, Tim, do you have?
Well, I was just
Coming
going to
up.
say, if we're going to put any language in there regarding like a cost of living, my suggestion would be is if we're going to include that type of language, currently under the state's expenditure restraint program, our general fund expenditures can't go up above a certain CPI, and that's August to August, and the state calculates that each year. And if we're going to put any type of language for cost of living, I think we would want to reference whatever the expenditure restraint percentage increase, reference that in the ordinance, and that way there's no confusion as to what time period it's calculated or how it's calculated. The state provides that every year.
Well, would that be useful? I mean, it's not something that's necessary, obviously, you didn't put it in there, but is it something that would be a useful thing, or is this just something that just adds on more?
I would say that's a question more for your colleagues than for me. I mean, what is their feeling on that? I mean, I can tell you that we can put it in, and it's more specific but, I guess it would be
What,
up to you guys if you want
what are your thoughts,
that in
Joe?
there.
I guess mostly indifferent on this item.
My take is, so, not to add to the confusion, but we're meeting every year, or the council's meeting every year to talk about where the budget is going to be at for the utility if it passes. So, but if we change anything, we need a 2/3 vote to change it at that meeting. And if we put in an automatic increase according to the state vocabulary to make that an automatic increase, then it would automatically increase this much. So if we met, or the council met once a year to talk about that, there may or may not be much to talk about. The goal is to not, in my opinion, is to increase this exponentially. Like, we know the roads are going to cost more. We all know, we've been through this, that, we could go for the 2.5 million that we're striving for in the beginning. And we've brought it back down to what it always was, which was, somebody said to me, which I thought was pretty smart, it's replacing one bad tax with another, hopefully better tax, where it's more equal and more able to be handled on a year-to-year basis versus one lump sum that just annihilates people's ability to budget for it. So I think that that's good terminology for it, because in the end, as I've stated many times, this is a tax, and I don't necessarily like it. But at the same time, I'm on the committee that's supposed to design it so that we can actually vote on it. So I'm kind of in the middle that way. I think to put the automatic increase in there, according to the state terminology, I think is a good thing to do. And if we can do that, I guess I would be okay not locking it in for a couple of years. Like, we can just let it go at that increase and then meet once a year to talk about, if we're going to do something different than that increase. And if so, we need a 2/3 majority to make it happen. Anybody else have anything to say? Add? So then we would need to have that added in there by tomorrow, correct? I think that's about the only change we're making tonight, right?
Yes, that would be the only change.
Okay. So with that added in there, all right. I need a little bit of help here, I think, Ms. Schill. If Mr. Austin made a motion already, I believe I seconded it, but now we just added in one thing.
Right, you can ask for unanimous consent to amend the motion to approve the ordinance with the change that you just discussed, which I guess, okay, so what you're saying is, so I can change this to a resolution to increase the transportation utility budget above the ERP CPI would require a 2/3 vote of members voting, so that it can, the CPI, it can be increased by the CPI just automatically each year, or each year, but I would still suggest a resolution each year, but that's going to be a simple majority resolution, or it's going to be automatic. So it's automatically going to be the CPI each year without any action on your parts? Is that what you're saying, until you, such time as you want to do a resolution to change it, which would require a 2/3 majority? Is that, okay, so I need to come up with some language on that then, but, okay. So it would automatically increase each year based on the ERP CPI. But if you ever want to increase it above that, that would require 2/3. Okay, think I got that right? So I'll put some language together for tomorrow then. But as I said, I think if you want to ask for unanimous consent to amend the motion to change this part, I think you could do that. And if no one objects, then the motion is amended and you can vote.
Okay, so I am, Ryan, you're still there, right?
Yeah, I'll amend my motion to what Attorney Schill stated.
And I'm taking a vote, the three of us.
Just say, does anyone object to amending the motion?
Does anyone object to amending the motion?
And no one does, so it's amended.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we had a first and second. Any other comments? Then I take it, anyone who agrees to pass this motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. So moved. Thank you. Number 4, review the bid results for the 2022 concrete contract for reconstruction projects and local road improvement projects and consider bid award. Joe?
So I'll take that one. So we solicited bids for our 2022 concrete contract for all our concrete work for this year's construction projects. I believe we had 4 prime contractors interested in the bid, but we only had 2 contractors that bid on the project. We had an engineer's estimate of approximately $605,000 for the concrete work for this year's projects, and we had SD Ellenbecker with a apparent low bid of approximately $557,000. So about $50,000 below our estimate. And then we had one more bid from Summers Construction for approximately $738,000. So the apparent low bidder is SD Ellenbecker, and we are recommending committee approval of Ellenbecker's bid for $557,264.45.
Any input? Questions?
Were these in our packet at all? I didn't see that. Did I miss it?
So we opened bids at noon today, and so there was a referral document with just some real basic background. The bid results were not included in the packet. We could run through the numbers again if you'd like.
So it just opened at noon today, and we're already voting on if we're going to take somebody?
That was it was at our last meeting. We knew that was happening. That was part of why we set it up for this afternoon, so we could talk about those bids after they came in. So, you know.
And you got 2 bids? Did you get any calls from anybody else wanting to bid on this?
No, there was one contractor that was possibly interested. Was Yankee a plan holder? Oh, okay. So we had some other subcontractors that were potentially interested in going along with a prime bidder and submitting a bid. But otherwise, no other interest.
When a bid opens, do you normally get the results right away?
Yeah, so it's a public opening. We do it online, but we also have it in the engineering department. So if anybody wanted to come and attend, that's always a possibility.
Is there a closing on this bid? There was an opening today at noon. Is there a closing? Has it been closed?
Yeah, so the closing is the actual bid opening. So say we're going to open bids at noon today, everybody has to have their numbers in by noon today.
I see. Okay. That works better in my head than the way I thought that it would be done. So, thank you.
My question is, not that I want to murky the waters or anything, but the responsible bidders ordinance that we just passed, did that go into effect with this?
It has not yet. These documents were all prepped and out for advertising. I think, and we usually try to have 4 or 5 weeks on average anyway, where they're out advertised, where the contractors have time to find them, and then decide if they're going to bid on it and prepare their numbers. So certainly moving forward, we'll have that RBO in place, and all the requirements.
Any concerns about the low bid contractor?
Nope.
No.
I believe they were the contractor last year for us,
Okay,
and everything went well.
okay. Thank you. Mr. Austin, do you have any questions, input?
No, I'm familiar with the contractor. I would make a motion to accept the low bid for the 2022 concrete contract and reconstruction project.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
All right.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, motion passes. Review referral list, number 5.
Yes, we did talk about the Smith and Cherry Street sidewalk, so that could be removed. Otherwise, we don't have any new referrals.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Number 6, adjourn. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. So moved. Thank you, everyone.